Good morning, everybody. Happy Monday. Children of the universe, let's go ahead and we're going to start our Astro-Babble for the morning, just to start off our week with some star things. Happy full moon week. We've got a fun full moon on Tuesday, but we're not here to talk about the weather, the astro weather. We're here to talk about some charts. So just as other Astro-Babbles have gone, we have 5 charts that have been donated by you, my lovely followers. If you would like to donate your chart to science, you can always private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I do need that exact birth time. And you can always submit friends and families charts with their consent, always with consent. Good morning, Alyssa, first to hop on Facebook. Yeah, so we're going to be looking over these 5 charts today, and likewise, I am also a professional astrologer and I teach astrology, so if you would like to get down and dirty with the stars, you can always just check my website, scorpiorisingastrology.com. Good morning, Bonnie. Good morning, everybody on Instagram who's joining. Thank you so much. So just as an FYI for those of you on Instagram, I can only screen share on Facebook or the recording on YouTube, so check those out if you actually want to see the charts that we're going to use. And let's go ahead and get to it, shall we? So our first chart is going to be Katrina. Katrina, my dear, how you doing? Let's take a peek at Katrina's chart. So we have a lovely Libra rising. Every time that Libra graces the ascendant and or the sun, there's a beauty and there's a lovely. Oh, Katrina, Katrina, girl, you hit me with some very, very strong planetary aspects first thing in this morning. Children of the live stream, I give to you Katrina's chart, who not only has an exalted Venus in Pisces, ruling the chart from the 6th house of work. So very much a fashion designer's chart, very much somebody who's very artistic, very much cultivating their own sense of style, works in an industry that is very art or image related. Just because that's what Venus does. She is the goddess of beauty, and when she is exalted, she has no choice but to share that beauty with everyone around her. We also have an exalted sun in Aries, in the 7th house of relationships. That is a very domineering partner that you've decided to pair yourself with, Katrina. A very domineering type that you've decided to be attracted to, the truest of true leaders. And we have an exalted moon in Taurus in the 8th house of business, which is in a half reception with that exalted Venus. Just absolutely flawless work stuff in Katrina's chart. Like this is what we look for in a chart to determine strength, right? Is we literally go down the list of the planets, and especially in Katrina's chart, first we look at the Lord of the chart, which in her case is Venus in Pisces, exalted, flawless. So we know that the 6th house of work, health, and pets, going to be very, very smooth sailing, going to be fabulous, going to be wonderful, going to be very, very blessed by the gods, good way to say it. Then we have the sun, the marker of ego and identity in Katrina's chart in the 7th house of relationships. Yes, it does bring an over-identification with relationships and the need to find one sense of self through other people, which can be dangerous early on in life, but life is not without danger. And having the sun in Aries, the sun of his exaltation, it's a very strong sun. So Katrina, because of her watery nature, because of her very Venusian nature that she's cultivated, she's partnering with the masculine archetype. That doesn't necessarily need to be a biological male, but the idea of that very strong, fiery, heated, passionate energy that comes along with the sun in Aries in the 7th house of relationships, that's a very strong choice. And likewise, the moon in Taurus, it's a very sensitive moon. It's a very laid back moon. It's a very easy moon. But what I enjoy about this chart so much is that Katrina's 6th house of work, her 8th house of business, and her 10th house of success all have some sort of exaltation or mutual reception to them. So we can see just by looking at Katrina's chart that her work dynamic is flawless, and it would not surprise me if she had very strong entrepreneurial tendencies. Again, we're looking at fields of fashion, of design, of artistry, of creative endeavors, of beauty, all the things that we would associate with an exalted Venus. an exalted moon, and that Venus moon combo ruling the ascendant and the 10th house of career are just very, very powerful astrological formations right off the bat. And we have one more kind of power trip to talk about in Katrina's chart before we delve into her weaknesses. So, and yes, that is, astrology is totally useful in FBI profiling. I wouldn't know that because I'm not a part of the FBI. But anyway, so when we look at the second house of finance, second house of finance also has exaltation in it, which is glorious, so glorious. Not exaltation, but rulership at least. We have Mars in his home sign of Scorpio. We also have Pluto, the secondary ruler of Scorpio, in his home sign, and we have Saturn retrograde in Scorpio, which is a little bit tricky. But this brings some very interesting dynamics into the financial house. Second house is the house of wealth. And having the ruler well placed in the house is an indicator for good money. But what I wanted to kind of pose to Katrina is that the nature of money is often hidden. And there's a lot of very interesting depth to your financial resources. Scorpio prefers to keep things in the shadows. Scorpio prefers to keep things out of view. Scorpio prefers to not be seen, and to have that energy in the house of finance and wealth. You know, Scorpio's good at hoarding and keeping things hidden. So keeping wealth under wraps, especially with Pluto and Scorpio here, as you age, as Pluto activates around 50 and as Saturn activates around 30, there are going to be major milestones in your life where finances just continue to double and triple, which I think is going to be fascinating for you to navigate, because it's just such an interesting placement that we would have in Katrina's second house of finance, that Scorpio energy, which normally does not like to rise above that surface level of water. It prefers to be kind of in the depths of its own caves, and to hoard those resources in that cave. And likewise, we could look at the archetype of Pluto, god of the underworld, you know, and him being in the second house of finance, and seeing that the underworld as the literal, represented by the literal richness of soil, and the treasures that are buried, like really powerful financial placements. But they do have a time component. They do need to mature halfway through the life with Pluto, and then at 30, and then again at 60 with Saturn. But I'm still a fan of the financial houses. Where we have issue in the charts is in the fourth house of home and family. And there are very specific reasons for why this area is an issue, Katrina. And unfortunately, this area is getting hit very, very hard by the current Saturn, Pluto, and Jupiter transits that are moving through our skies right now and producing a lot of very intense dynamics. So what I wanted to kind of talk about with you and unpack with you is, even though we have so much going right in your life, there's always going to be this kind of anchor that weighs you down in the fourth house, and we need to be able to work with that therapeutically. And a lot of it has to deal with family and family money, potentially inheritance, or the money suck that is kind of family at times. But we have Jupiter, the most prosperous planet in your chart, in the sign of his detriment, whereas we already talked about different planets in their favorite signs, in their exaltations, and in their rulerships in other areas of your chart. Here we see Jupiter, who's supposed to be really expansive and growth oriented, but he's in a restricted earth sign of Capricorn, where he's forced to move very, very slow. And it is the sign of his detriment. We also have Neptune in Capricorn here, bringing some confusion elements, bringing some detrimental fantasy elements that are coming to the surface, all in that fourth house, which really tells me that this is kind of the weakest area of your chart. So we would need to remediate the fourth house of home and family, specifically by working with Saturn, specifically by doing some ancestral work, very much looking at geomancy and feng shui of your own personal home to make sure that those energies are circulated and that you can remain grounded but not trapped by the energy of your own space. Lots of interesting dynamics and remediations that we could work with. We could do an ancestor altar for the fourth house of family. Lots of options, but I think we need to recognize that, you know, if there was an area, like if everything's going really well and you're on cloud nine, but you're wondering like, hey, what do I need to be working on? Like, what am I striving towards? I think one of the things that needs healing and repair is this fourth house of family, darling. Because, you know, you're already working on traveling for business. You're already working on growth and lessons and working with foreign cultures and all of this really kind of powerful strength that's in your chart. But when we don't, when we're kind of coasting on our own dovetails and we're resting on our laurels, I think that's an excellent opportunity for us to do some very painful digging into the spots that are needing our attention, not necessarily the already really blessed places of your chart. So that's all I have to say about that. So thank you, Katrina. I very much appreciate you donating your chart. I hope you found that super helpful. Yes, happy Monday, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Let's go to chart number 2. Chart number 2 is Becky. Becky, how you doing? We've got Pisces on the... Oh, child. Becky. 2 very interesting charts this morning. Here we're graced by a Scorpio stellium. Yeah, forgot to take a drink of my coffee. I picked it up to drink it, and I didn't even drink it. I got so distracted by the Scorpio. Okay, my darling. So, Becky, we have to have a heart-to-heart, me and you, because as a triple water sign myself, who has Sun and Moon in Cancer and Scorpio on the ascendant, I'm uniquely qualified to talk to you about the bullshittery that is the astrological placements that you have decided to come in with. And don't get me wrong, water signs at their peak are glorious. They're empathetic, they're loving, they're compassionate, they're the most safe signs. When they're operating at their peak, don't come for me, when they're operating at their peak, when they are not operating at their peak, when I tell you that they are the fiercest, most detrimental signs that you will never see them coming. Yeah. And a lot of that issue, a lot of that stress when these water placements aren't expressed properly does get directed inward, because water is also a reflective element and tends to do a lot of internal brooding. So it's very specific lessons that you need to understand about yourself and your chart, Becky. Yeah. And a lot of that has to do with the idea of the element of water being very, very overwhelming in your chart. So for those of you who can't see on Instagram, or for those of you who just want the recap on Facebook, we have the ascendant at 6 degrees of Pisces. Then we have a stellium including a fallen Venus in Scorpio, Pluto in Scorpio, Moon in Scorpio, South Node in Scorpio, Sun in Scorpio, and Saturn in Scorpio, all in the 9th house of foreigners, higher learning, travel, and spirituality. It is a very spiritual chart. Like, girl, if you're not already awakening your mediumship abilities, I fear that you may have repressed them very deeply, because the level of water in your chart, the level of subconscious activity in your chart is so strong. It's so powerful. It's so empathetic. Like, you need to get a hold on that. So having all these placements in the 9th house does actually make you potentially a very good astrologer. If you would like to do that. I know that's not necessarily kind of what you're here for, like you're here to learn how to teach, but you know, you can still teach through the stars, right? In fact, they can be a really nice scapegoat for you to tell people what they need to hear, and not necessarily what they want to hear through their astrological placements, you know. But I think in the meantime, what's going to be most difficult is you also have a new moon in your chart. So when we see the moon in the same sign as the sun, there's the moon at her weakest point. She's about to go behind the sun. It's not an exact new moon, but it's within 12 hours. And so when we look at Scorpio, who is already a very hidden sign, Scorpio, who is already a very withdrawn sign, Scorpio, who is already a very emotional sign, you've decided to hide your moon, your emotional center, behind your sun in Scorpio as well. So when I say that you hide things so well that you end up forgetting about them because you've hidden them so well that you've also hid them deeply from yourself. Like, I know you understand that. I know you understand that. Because I do it too, right? You think, oh, I'm the master of my emotions. I feel so much stuff all the time. If I just put this little thing over here, out of view, I'll come back to it. Like, I got this. And then, 2 months later, you return to that emotion and it's molding and crusty and has stuff growing on it. And, something's latched onto it for all you know. So there's a lot of spiritual responsibility, there's a lot of emotional responsibility, there's a lot of emotional intelligence that needs to happen for sure with these placements. So just be aware that your chart needs extra navigating in the water department, in the emotional department, as well as in the ninth house of higher learning, spirituality, travel, foreigners. We do have both Venus and Mars in detriment, although they are in mutual reception here. They're not in detriment, they're in fall. Mars is in Libra in the 8th house of business, death, taxes, estates. And Venus is in Scorpio in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher learning, education. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if you also worked in international law, if you traveled abroad for work, all those things that we would look at in your chart. Jupiter, where is Jupiter going in your chart? Yeah, fame is tricky. Recognition is tricky in your chart. Part of it is because you don't want to be recognized, my dear. That's the catch-22 of hiding, right? You're not necessarily just hiding from others. You're also hiding from yourself, and you're making it difficult for you to be recognized on all levels, including when you do something nice or good. Yeah, you're kind of like the invisible knight in that way. So that's tricky. And with Jupiter ruling your 10th house of success, as well as your ascendant, self-confidence is already low. There's a lot of personal remediation that needs to happen on the emotional front with that placement. But I think if you wanted to do some Jupiter remediation, it would be very, very helpful for your chart. Working with Jupiter, working with Dionysus, working with that kind of mayoral kingly figure that is full of confidence and riches. I think that would be an excellent archetype for you to start to embrace and pull yourself out of that hidden Scorpio 9th house. There's a lot to unpack there for sure. Yeah, but you're not going to get attention in the way that everybody else gets attention. So as long as you understand that you're kind of going to be that invisible knight that kind of goes around doing acts of good deeds and can't be seen by other people, like accepting that to a certain degree, but also knowing that if you feel the need to be recognized, you need to embrace those Jupiterian qualities. Both your Mars, your Jupiter, your Sun, the active planets in your chart are all in signs they either don't appreciate, they're hidden from view, or they're in water signs. And so that makes it really difficult to embrace the divine yang, the masculine, the ability for you to step up and claim your pride, the ability for you to step up and claim the spotlight. That's a very difficult aspect of your chart. And I think that if you're dealing with heavier, darker, emotional themes, spiritual themes even, where you're like, what am I supposed to do with this? I think embracing the more active role and acting first and asking questions later, because you already tend to overthink things, because you already tend to be super sensitive to the possibilities that will not even happen, but are just psychic wavelengths that are frankly very weak and do not need your attention as much. I think that there's a lot that needs to be kind of worked with in your chart, understanding the nuances, so we can always go over that kind of one-on-one, but I think that that's probably the crux of your chart. Master that before you ask other kind of important questions. Excellent. Okay, so that was Becky. Let's go ahead and we'll talk about Bonnie. Bonnie, following the train. So it seems like the water signs are coming very much forward in the live stream this morning. This morning we have Bonnie. So we have another water stellium here, but this is a very interesting water stellium and has a very different flavor than the last water stellium that we had. So here we have the sun in Cancer, the ascendant in Cancer, conjoined at 6 degrees, exactly. Jupiter in Cancer, in the sign of his exaltation, lovely. And out of combustion with the sun, flawless, plus Mercury and Cancer all in the first house. So, Bonnie, when I tell you that you identify with the archetype of Cancer, we need to understand that you're just the mom, right? In fact, it's funny. Like when I say that you're the mom, I don't just mean that you are a mom. I mean that you are the archetypal mother for everybody that you come into contact with. That is the energy that has stamped your spirit, that you've decided to fully embrace this time around. And I'm here for it. I think it's great. But that overly abundant, super compassionate, very compassionate, bleeding heart type energy that Cancer tends to throw forward. Now, Cancer is also tricky because Cancer does, when not expressed properly, know how to put the mother in smother. It is a thing. Yeah, so we need to make sure that your needs are met, especially with your moon in Aries in the 10th house of success. Like, for you to be recognized is very, very important for you. Very, very important, to the degree that if somebody does not say thank you, yeah, you will never cook for them again. Yeah. It's one of those things where, having a moon in Aries brings a lot of heat, brings a lot of fire, brings a lot of intensity, brings a lot of, in some cases, rage or anger. It also brings a short emotional fuse. So although we have this loving, watery energy that you've decided to surround yourself with, we also have this really fiery temperament that can sometimes get very lashing, very out of control, very heated, if not nourished properly, because that is the ruler of your chart as well. And the big thing that this moon wants is to be recognized for the efforts that are given. It's not a hard ask, yeah, but when you present yourself in this costume of the Eternal Mother, who is divinely compassionate and does not ask for the love that she gives, right? She just gives unconditionally. When you flip around and say, excuse me, what do we say? Like, that's a double standard and can lead to emotional scarring, because other people felt vulnerable with you. They opened up to you. They allowed you in because they thought that you were non-threatening and here to take care of them. And then you demand things that, frankly, they might not be able to give. Yeah? What if somebody had a hard day and they cannot tap into the emotion of gratitude? You want them to just say the words? Like, that's not helpful. It's not helpful to either of you. So I think that that's something that we need to understand about your chart, is although there is divine amounts of grace and a very goddess-oriented energy that comes through you quite easily, we also have this fiery side that needs to be not just acknowledged, but pushed to the front, and for you to understand the validation that you need in order to perform the way that you do. Okay, let's see. What else do we want to talk about? Your ego, your sun, your identity is also very much connected with finances. Money is a very, very big part of your life. We have Venus here, we have Saturn here in Leo. Although, money isn't always super abundant. You know how to make do, you know how to make things look good, basically, on a budget. But I think we also need to understand that your financial status also contributes a lot to your identity. And so if for some reason you're feeling lower than normal, if you're feeling like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, one of the reasons for that might actually be your financial state. It might not have anything to do with your emotions or your sense of worth externally, but it is very much your own perception of your value internally, both from a physical financial perspective and from a metaphysical perspective. Let's see. What else do we want to talk about? You'd be very good as a travel agent. Yeah. Because that exalted Jupiter in your first house of self is connected to the 6th house of work and the 9th house of travel. You'd be very, very good with that. You'd also be a great vet. You do very well in medicine. You do very well in nursing with all that cancer. We know. We know there's just so much for you to give. And especially one of the easiest ways for you to receive recognition is actually getting promotions or praise from your job, or for you to be handed kind of keys to the city for a particular realm of authority in the workplace. Like that would definitely satisfy that moon in Aries, that leadership skills. If you wanted to run a floor in a hospital, like that would be the kind of ego boost that you would need to kind of satisfy that moon. Yeah, and again, we go back to money. There's interesting money stuff in your chart because that second house is also connected to the fourth house of family. And I think that there's also a good chance for steady inheritance. I think that there's also fascinating dynamics with just family money. Because we've got Saturn in the second house of finance ruling the eighth house of inheritance, death, taxes, estates, and then Venus from the second house of finance ruling the fourth house of family. There's a lot of interplay there that I think needs to be kind of unpacked and respected about generational wealth and maybe what traps you're falling into personally that may or may not fit where you need your sense of value to be at this time. Because Saturn is ruling your seventh house of finance, like you're going to be with somebody who's very financially independent, and also who provides a lot to your personal financial security and safety, which is good. Being taken care of financially in the chart is always a fun marker to see when things feel a little bit rocky. It's always nice to know that you have multiple safety nets in place from that perspective. And Saturn in your second house of finance ruling the seventh house of relationships and the eighth house of inheritance. That's acquired money through close-knit relationships, basically. No, I think that's pretty much it. Bonnie. So thank you so much for donating your chart. I hope that was helpful for you. Go ahead. Good morning, everybody. You're not wrong. Sorry. I do tend to talk fast when I get excited. Yes, so if you would like to schedule a reading, people are getting kind of questions and comments coming in from both Instagram and Facebook. So if you would like to get on the live streams where we do your chart publicly, you just need to private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time, and I'll add you to the list. If you would like to work with me privately, and you would like to have a more in-depth consultation where I actually look at your chart, look at transits ahead of time, and we talk about life and what's coming up for you and what has happened and hash out your weak spots and your strengths, like we can always do that too, but that's a formal consult and I do charge for that. And we can have you go to my website, Colleen, specifically with ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. Just click the consultations page and fill out the session request form. Send me an email that way and we'll do it that way. Okay. So yeah, there's that. Okay, let's talk about Tarot Garden from Instagram. Hello, Tarot Garden. Love you, darling. Let's see. What do we have here? Ooh. Baby. Fascinating. Ooh, your chart is rather tricky but interesting, and I like it. So first and foremost, Aries ascendant, right? Gives you a little bit of heat, gives you a little bit of spark, a little bit of that fire. We've also got the North Node in the first house, which means that this time around, one of the big things that you're actually working on is your sense of identity, and really understanding not just who you are metaphysically, but also who you are physically in terms of body stuff, health stuff. Yeah. So that's something to be aware of. We have just a first house emphasis in terms of life's purpose. The ruler of your chart is Mars in Capricorn in the sign of his exaltation in the 10th house of success. That is an excellent success marker, my dear. You attach your identity to being in the spotlight, which I find good for Mars, because Mars understands that it's not Mars, especially exalted in Capricorn, who slows him down and really channels that fire, understands that it's not necessarily just about the 15 minutes of fame, right? It's also about understanding that you need to work for success, you need to work for recognition, and you need to put in the time, yeah, to go the distance. And that's absolutely beautiful. That 10th house of success. We have multiple career options for you, my dear. Multiple career options. You could do well via 9th house topics of travel, foreigners, higher education, spirituality. You could do well via that exalted Mars ruling the 8th house of taxes in regards to accounting, business, law, you'd be really good at. Let's see, we could also see you being a teacher, because the 6th house of work is ruled by Mercury and Gemini through the 3rd house of writing, teaching, and communication. Your sun is also here in Gemini. Quick mind, very quick mind, very speedy, very witty. I enjoy your ability to write and speak and prose your way through your problems. I think that that's beautiful. Great skill to have, especially when paired with that Aries ascendant. Gives you good leadership qualities. Yeah, the more I look at your chart, the more I'd really like you to leverage the strength of your 3rd house. I'd really like you to look at your sun in Gemini, your Mercury in Gemini, and see that that's really where your strengths lie, in the 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication. Also siblings. Wouldn't surprise me if you were a twin, having Mercury and Gemini in the 3rd of siblings, the sign of the twins, ruler of that house, in that house. So yeah, that's going to be a really sweet spot. If you can leverage that 3rd house of writing, teaching, communication, you're going to be absolutely set. You'd be a great copywriter. You'd be a great ghostwriter. Not that you couldn't write your own stuff, but hey, if you got the skill, milk it for what it's worth. Again, that Mars in Capricorn ruling the chart, like practicality is really a good thing. You got a good head on your shoulders. I'm here for it. We do have some dark spots in the chart. We have Jupiter in Pisces in the 12th, as well as Moon in Pisces in the 12th. There is this hidden sensitivity. There is this hidden psychism, very deep mediumship placements here as well. Very strong spirituality, but spirituality that can also get you into trouble. Spirituality that's often rediscovered during times of crisis or deep, profound healing. As an FYI, ancestors also very, very present. I would encourage you to work with that, because you've got this Venus in Cancer in the 4th, which is a great family placement, but also because the Moon in Pisces from the 12th house of deep karmic healing is ruling that 4th house of family. I think you working with the ancestors would be absolutely fabulous, in whatever tradition or bloodline you personally carry. Working with the mighty dead, the proficient who have passed. That would be excellent for you, for sure, because Jupiter is also just very, very prosperously placed in your 12th house of karmic healing. Yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. But again, it's such a dynamic chart, because we have this fiery ascendant tempered by this practical view of success. Career stuff is really kind of jack of all trades-ish. Yeah. And then we have the spirituality to balance out on top of it. Like, there are many different plates that you're kind of carrying at the same time, many plates of personality that are spinning, and they're all pretty strong. They're all pretty strong. So I think we need to understand that, hey, like, there is a time for you to work on career. There is a time for you to really get into your writing space, your creative space, your teaching space, and you sharing your knowledge and wisdom with the world. And then I also think that there's this kind of deep reverence for your spiritual practice, often including but not limited to a practice of ancestor worship, or working with the spirits of those who have passed via mediumship, or your own personal bloodline to help yourself and or others or other family members heal through that 12th house of karma. Yeah. Cool. And what a challenge. What a challenge. You've decided to put that North Node in the first house, kind of looping it around back to that developing of a sense of self, right? That's what you're really trying to focus on here with the North Node in the first. But you have three pieces of you. How do you balance and combine them into one person? You know, we could do that through remediation. We could do that through philanthropy, different activities, how you spend your time, the people you hang out with. Lots of different ways to balance that. But I think, you know, understanding those three pieces of who you are and then finding a way for all of them to play nice and get their own chance to shine, that's going to be the challenge of your chart, my dear. Cool. Thank you. Thank you for donating your chart. I appreciate it. Okie dokie. Last chart we have Frank. Frank. How you doing, Frank? Cheers. Okay, Frank. So we've got Aquarius at 28 degrees. Yeah, so Frank, when you messaged me with your chart time, you specifically said, hey, I have a very interesting 7th house, and you would, if I didn't use whole sign houses, which puts all your stuff into the 8th. So this is a very interesting dynamic for you to understand and unpack, Frank, and we're going to use your chart as a little bit of an example. We're going to pick on you a little bit, not you, but we're going to pick on, you know, part of my process that I often have to explain to clients who are also familiar with astrology to a certain degree, just enough to be dangerous. We need to kind of go through this education, this teachable moment, right? So I use whole sign houses, which means that each of my houses is divided by 30 degrees, and the sign that rules your ascendant, the sign that is your ascendant, your rising sign, starts the chart off at 0 degrees. So in your case, you have Aquarius rising. Yeah, your ascendant at 28 degrees Aquarius, which means the chart starts the first house at 0 degrees Aquarius, which shifts the planetary alignment of your chart if you're used to using uneven house systems like Placidus, right? Which I used Placidus for a very, very long time, right? Close to a decade I used Placidus. I was exposed to traditional astrology, Hellenistic astrology, whole sign houses, took additional training and certifications in that system. And when I brought the whole sign houses forward, the accuracy was just absolutely undeniable. So interesting. One thing that we can think about, Frank, yeah, is where you personally identify. Yeah, sun placement is always a really great place for us to kind of unpack a lot of this whole sign Placidus discrepancy. Yeah. So your chart in Placidus would have the sun in Virgo in the 7th house of relationships. Yeah. This would mean that you would be attracted to a Virgo spouse. This means you would be attracted to somebody who is neat and who is tidy and who is slightly anal retentive and who is very feng shui oriented and very picky and very much about getting things done off their to-do list, right? And you would identify very heavily with the idea of relationships, that relationships complete you as a person. And in some ways they do, because your sun is still ruling the 7th house via Leo. However, yeah, you are in fact very much attracted to a Leo spouse. Yeah, you want somebody who can let their hair down. You want somebody who's a little bit of a party animal. You want somebody who has not just Leo energy, but Uranus in Leo, the literal planet of unpredictability in the fiery drama sign of Leo, as well as Jupiter in Leo, the gas giant. Like, you want somebody with a larger than life personality. And I'm sorry, but if we put Mars and Venus and the sun all in Virgo in your 7th house, it wouldn't be the same, right? So when that's one of the key things that we talk about is also like, hey, just through this basic delineation of where the sun is located, do you identify more with relationships, or do you identify more with where your sun actually is, which is in the 8th house of death, taxes, estates, and business? Yeah. This is where you get your entrepreneurial flair. This is where one of the things that really makes you a business person. Yeah. In addition to Saturn ruling your chart from the 10th house of success, which is also a little bit tricky because that would have been in the 9th house of travel, foreigners, higher education. And you're not necessarily one for travel, right? You would prefer to keep things grounded, prefer to keep things stable, predictable, a routine, have some fun in the shadows on the sides, but really make sure that you have a structured, ordered schedule instead of the spontaneous 9th house, which is asking you to do things like grow, growth. Another thing that's interesting about your chart is we have this very, very delicate, very soft, very, very grounded moon in Taurus in the 4th house of family. And I enjoy this placement for you, Frank. I really do, for a couple reasons. With all of this intensity that you've kind of packed into to the 7th, and then all of this practicality that you've packed into the 8th and the 10th. I think coming into the 4th house of home and family and realizing that like your greatest pleasure is to come home with dinner made, prop your feet up, crack open a cold one, and cuddle, right? Go take a bubble bath, and indulge in the sensory delights that a moon in Taurus very, very much enjoys within the privacy of your own home. Moon in Taurus in the 4th is the stereotypical placement for home is safe space, home is sanctuary, and it is the ultimate recuperative placement. But we also need to know that like your love language is touch. Yeah. Your love language is being surrounded by the sensory delights and the physical pleasures that Taurus really prefers. Yeah. And sometimes that can get a little bit out of hand because we have a square between your moon, your ascendant, and your Pluto. That's very prevalent in the chart between the 1st house of self, the 7th house of relationships, and the 4th house of home and family. And I think what this really says is like you need to be able to retreat into your own space. Like you need to have the dark corners of your life where you can just indulge you and not necessarily worry about what anybody else thinks or what anybody else needs. Yeah, because you do a lot, right? Having such prominent placements in the 8th house of business and you following the rules, doing for others, like you're here as a servant, right? You're here to allow other people to find stability in your actions. But then you come home and there is a piece of you that just wants to just collapse into your satin sheets and just roll around in a bunch of pillows and not talk to anybody for 2 seconds. And this is where the conflict happens with the relationship dynamic as well, to a certain extent, is unless you're in business together and unless you have stuff to talk about to kind of wind you down gracefully from the business life into the relationship life, I think it's really quite difficult when you have such a dramatic, fiery, outgoing personality like who you're naturally attracted to spouse-wise, with all of these very expansive, dynamic planets in your 7th house of relationships, and then all you want is something predictable and stable and simple and delicious and rustic, and beautiful and pleasing to the senses. You don't want to go out clubbing. Like you don't want, like it's exciting to look at and it's fun to watch and it's nice from time to time to shake you out of a rut, but to nourish somebody who constantly needs that stimulus from you, like that's a little bit overbearing with some of these sturdier, more rule abiding or fixed placements that you have in your chart, Frank. So I think that that's something that needs to be understood. Finances will always be connected to your relationships. That's always going to be a thing, whether it's you providing for them, them providing for you, but money will always be a major staple of your relationships. Interesting note, when I say that to some clients, they're like, oh, well, isn't that always the case? No. No, it is not always the case. So that's a fun kind of connection and delineation that you have in your chart. We do have Mercury and Libra in the 9th, ruled by that Venus in the 8th. Yeah, travel for work is a possibility, but only if you're there in a judicial or an organizational capacity. Like, you'd be a great traveling consultant, but that would really be the only way that you would energetically feel fit to do major travel, as if you were going for work, and if you were specifically hired on or paid money to go on that trip, in order to fix other people's messes, which you kind of delight in as that Virgo sun. Yeah, one of the things that we'll kind of wrap up with this North Node placement in the 11th house of friendships, tribes, and social groups. I mean, one of the things that you're really trying to do throughout the life is be more social, find your tribe, connect with people that you can really resonate with, and understand that you... Yeah, Frank, here we go. Listen. Understand that you don't need to do it alone. You don't need to do it all by yourself. You don't need to be a one-man band, Frank, right? So I think that that's something that you need to kind of keep in the back of your head. Is like, yes, there's so much that you can do, and you have great strength in your chart, and you have a lot of really beautiful things, including, a rare quality, which is the ability to please yourself with this moon in Taurus in the 4th. Like, you relish in the simple things, and a lot of people forget that when they're so productive. So I think that that's beautiful, but what you're really trying to do is reach outside of your comfort zone and to balance that ability to be social and to find your groups and your tribes and your community, while who you will be introduced to through your spouse, because you certainly wouldn't seek them out on your own, while you're here doing what you feel needs to be done and checking off things from your to-do list. Okay? Cool. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate you very, very much. Thank you for donating your chart to science. Yes. So that is the end of our live stream today. Thank you, everybody, for jumping on. I appreciate it. I'll continue to do these as support and charts continue to flow in. If you would like to be on the live stream, feel free to private message me your birth date, place, and exact birth time. I will add you to the list. Please be patient. The list is very long, but I will message you when your chart is featured. And if you would like to work privately with me, you can always go to my website, ScorpioRisingAstrology.com. You can check out the recorded online classes for astrology that I have. You can submit a consultation request form, and we can work one-on-one on what the stars say about you and how to work with that. So in the meantime, I'll let you go. Have a fantastic start to your week, and may the stars be ever in your favor.